Hey there, it's Davide from the Partner Success team. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to trigger dynamic screen pops when agents handle digital conversations. This functionality is particularly useful in scenarios where customers are not interested in a full integration with a third-party solution inside the agent desktop layout, but they still require the agents to operate with an external application to properly support their end users. Before we start, I recommend you to check out our vidcast dedicated to flow variables in the agent desktop, as we will leverage this functionality when covering the actual system configuration. I will leave the link to the vidcast in the description below. In this video, when discussing the screen pop functionality, I'll be referring to the screen pop node available in the Flow Designer inside the Webex Connect. I want to make sure there's no confusion with the native or custom widgets that can run inside the agent desktop and appear when certain conditions are met, like for example, when the agents answer an incoming conversation. The screen pop node allows the agent desktop to automatically open a new browser tab toward a desired URL or a small notification in the top right corner that can be clicked to manually trigger the new browser tab. In fact, when we look at this node configuration, we can see at the bottom that it offers 3 pop-up options. Actually, as we're into the node's configuration, let's have a look at the other parameters which are required to ensure it gets properly executed. From the top, we have the method, which in this case it's only one, and it's screen pop. Below it, we are required to select one of the authentications that are already configured. Then we have the task ID and the agent ID. These two parameters are required to let the system know which is the agent who needs to receive the pop-up, and equally important, to which conversation it will need to be related, as the agent could be in multiple conversations at the same time. I know I use the word conversation when the field here is called task ID. If you recall what we covered in the Intro to Digital Channels vidcast, you'll then remember that whenever a user starts a digital conversation that needs to reach an agent, Webex Connect creates a unique ID called Conversation ID to map all the messages from and to that user. But in order to communicate with Webex Contact Center and map all the messages from and to the agent, there is another ID that gets created, which is the Task ID. The Task ID is then mapped to the Conversation ID, and in this way, the system is able to link the messages from and to the users with the one from and to the agents. You then may derive that this node is designed to trigger the pop-up only when the agent is in an actual conversation. So please keep in mind that Flow will not be able to trigger pop-ups at any time, but only after the conversation with an agent is initiated. But before we discuss more in detail when and how administrators should trigger the screen pop, let's complete the review of the node configuration. Below the task and agent ID fields, we can see the one where it's possible to specify the actual URL, and below it, administrators can optionally add parameters that will be appended to the URL. All these fields can be set with a static value or with a dynamic variable to allow more flexibility on the content that will be displayed. The parameters will be added at the end of the URL with the following syntax: question mark, the value inside the first key field, equal sign, the value of the corresponding value field, and then, if there are additional parameters, the ampersand sign, followed again by the second key, equal sign, and the second value, and so on in case there are more parameters. A very common example here is to define a URL of a third-party CRM or ticketing system where the last portion of the URL will be a combination of the field name containing the ticket number and the actual ticket ID. And the last parameter in the node configuration is indeed the pop-up behavior I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Inside Desktop will trigger a small notification inside the desktop application, and the agent will have to manually click on it to trigger the pop-up. New Browser tab will always trigger a new browser tab for any screen pop node execution, while the existing browser tab will first check if a pop-up tab is already present in the browser, and if none is present, it will create a new tab. But if one already exists, it will refresh the content inside it for the new URL. For both of these last two options, when the screen pop is triggered, the browser will move the focus from the tab you're currently on to the one specified here. Alright, now that we know how to configure this node, we need to discuss where to use it inside the flows. As we discussed a moment ago, the screen pop must be triggered only after the agent accepts the conversation. This means that it's very likely that the screen pop node will not be added into the regular channel-specific flow, as those are meant to route incoming messages from the users, and inside those flows, there's no trigger or checkpoint that can tell the flow the agent accepted the conversation. Therefore, administrators should consider using the screen pop through the so-called channel-agnostic flows, which are also known as event flows. These flows are normally optional and can be triggered when the agent accepts the incoming conversation, when the agent transfers an ongoing conversation, or when the agent ends an active conversation. Alternatively, it's also possible to trigger the screen pop via an engage event, which can trigger a custom flow behind a connect webhook. Let's have a look how both methods work and how to set them up. Administrators can download the dedicated template channel agnostic flows from our GitHub, linked in the description, but the same logic can be manually configured when creating a new flow from scratch. All we need is a flow where the starting node is set as the webexCC task node, and inside it, one of the three different trigger events is selected. The task close event occurs when the conversation is ended, typically by the agent. The task modified refers to the moment when the agent completes the transfer of an ongoing conversation. And finally, the task routed occurs when the agent hits the accept button and starts the conversation with the user. The flow will get automatically triggered when the selected event occurs, and no further manual action is required by the agent. If we then look inside the output variable, we can note two which contain the information we need for the screen pop node, the webex.id, which contains the task ID, and the webex.agentID, which, as the name suggests, contains the agent ID. So if we bring a screen pop node inside the flow and we link it to the start node, we can immediately set it up to trigger the desired screen pop to the desired agent. Once we complete the mapping of all the unsuccessful outcomes, we can make the flow live. Now we can save the flow and make it live. Before we move on, there are a couple of important points to mention about the event flows. First, when an agnostic flow is configured for a specific event, it will be valid for the entire tenant. Only one flow for each event shall be active. If the administrators create and activate a second flow for the same event, both will be executed at the same time, which might then lead to confusing and undesired behaviors. And second, when configured, anytime an event is happening, the configured flow will be executed. So if, for example, the administrator wants to trigger the screen pop when the agent accepts the conversation, like in this case, but only in the case of a web chat conversation, or maybe the screen pop is only needed for a very specific team or queue, a branch node will be required in between these two nodes so to define the actual condition that will determine whether or not the screen pop will be triggered. And specifically for this last point, you may want to explore the content inside the task node output variable called webex.requestBody and webex.variables, which contain lots of extremely valuable information, all from the agent desktop. In fact, it's even possible to retrieve variables set in the channel-specific flows whenever they are made visible to the agent. A common scenario would be a chat flow where the user is invited to provide their ID inside a pre-chat form, and inside the flow, the administrators have set a data dip in a third-party platform to see if there's any ticket already open for this user. And in this case, the administrator could then make the ticket ID visible to the agent when using the set variable node inside the chat flow. And since that ticket ID will be available inside the agent desktop, when the agent accepts the conversation, the administrator can take that information inside the event flow and then use it to customize the screen pop node, either in the URL or as additional parameter. To simplify the adoption of this use case, we created two templated flows, respectively a web chat and a task routed flow, with the detailed instructions, which I will link in the description if you want to test it out. Let's review now the other method to trigger the screen pop via engage events, which allows the agent to manually trigger the pop-up whenever they want. For this use case, we need to create a new flow starting from a brand new webhook. As the flow loads and the webhook node opens, select the Create a New Event option and give it a name of your choice. So if we scroll down to the sample input, we will then need to specify any additional variables we expect the agents will provide. Let's follow the same example we were just reviewing a moment ago, where we want to look up a ticket, so that's what the agent will need to provide. And so this flow will need to receive the ticket ID, the task ID, and the agent ID inside the request body. Please note that here we can define any name we want, but then we'll need to use the same name inside engage when we will set up the event trigger. Let's parse the content here and save the node configuration. Now we can add the screen pop node, link the nodes together, and open it. Inside here, we can refer the task and agent IDs from the start node. And then define the URL we want to open, referring the ticket ID wherever our third-party application will expect it. In this example, I will just add it as an extra parameter. Once we complete the mapping of all the unsuccessful outcomes, we can make the flow live. And while the flow goes live, we can then move to Control Hub and open Engage. In here, navigate to Groups, Default, again Default, then Events and Rules, and then hit the Add New Event button. Give it a name of your choice, select the method post, and copy the webhook URL from the start node we just set up inside Connect. Then scroll down and hit the Add Parameter button. In the pop-up that appears from the Pass-Through drop-down, select the request body. Then inside the parameter field, enter the name specified in the webhook node for the ticket ID. As value, select the one named custom parameter. Then leave the toggle on the option to allow the agents to manually enter the value. Finally, hit the Add button. Let's repeat the process for the task ID. And finally, add the parameter for the agent ID. However, this time, let's select the login ID from the value drop-down. Please repeat this process to add any other parameters in case you added more into your webhook. Once all the parameters are added, hit the Save button at the bottom of the page. And with this, we're all set. If we now get a test agent logged and ready to accept incoming conversation, and we start any digital conversation that will be queued in the team where he belongs, we will see the conversation landing on his desktop. And as soon as the Accept button is clicked, the screen pop will be triggered via the channel agnostic flow. And if we now hit the event icon and select the one we just set up, this event will request the agent to specify the ticket ID and the task ID. We can copy the task ID from the URL of the agent desktop, while for the ticket ID, we can see it through the cat variables. And when the event is triggered, a new tab will be open to the URL with the parameter we specified. There are plenty of different use cases that can be tested. Please go ahead and explore them in your tenant. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Let us know if you have any questions in the comment. See you soon and thanks for watching.